Intro. Grainy archival footage. Moscow 1960s, a secret aerodynamics lab in shadows. The room smells like steel, cold sweat, and ambition. Soviet engineers in thick-rimmed glasses huddle over a strange, shark-like aircraft model. A machine that looks like it fell out of a Hollywood sci-fi set. It was called the MiG-105 Spiral. But this isn't a movie. It was real, and it was decades ahead of its time. Prologue. The origins of a dream. The MiG-105 Spiral wasn't a fighter jet. It wasn't a bomber. It wasn't even technically an aircraft. It was something different. An orbital interceptor. In the early 1960s, the USSR was knee-deep in the Cold War and the space race. America was planning the X-20 Dinosaur, a spaceplane that could orbit Earth and drop bombs. The Russians needed an answer. Their answer was the Spiral. The MiG-105 wasn't just a military program. It was a vision, a fusion of jet technology and space travel, years before the Space Shuttle or Dream Chaser. It wasn't just a plane. It was a statement. We can touch space, and we can do it Soviet style. But then it all fell apart. The dream takes shape. Picture this. It's 1965. The Soviet Union has already put a man in space. Now they want to weaponize the cosmos. They begin designing a reusable orbital vehicle, one that could launch atop a booster rocket, reach orbit, and glide back to Earth using aerodynamic lifting surfaces. That's when the MiG-105 was born, right on paper first, then in steel and rivet. With a sleek profile shaped like a manta ray with wings, the MiG-105 was designed to be launched from an aircraft or a multi-stage rocket, complete a mission in orbit, and return in a controlled piloted descent, landing on a runway like a regular aircraft. It was the future of war. An aerial vehicle that could deploy weapons in space or scramble to intercept enemy satellites. It was so far ahead of its time that even today, 50-plus years later, it still looks like a prototype from tomorrow. The design stranger than fiction. The MiG-105 Spiral was not a conventional aircraft. Forget wings, forget thrust vectoring. It was shaped like a flat triangular body with a blunt nose and a lifting surface instead of wings. The design was called a lifting body, a shape that generates lift without wings, similar to the US HL-10 and NASA's Dream Chaser. Here's how nuts it was. Length, 8.5 meters, about as long as a bus. Weight, roughly 10 tons, heavy for something meant to space glide. Crew, 1 pilot. Landing, no vertical booster. This thing would fly back and land on a normal runway like a gliding brick. The nose was rounded to handle heat buildup during re-entry. There were retractable landing gear. The exhaust was embedded in the tail. A tiny cockpit with bubble windows gave the pilot a tight field of view. It was basically a flying tank with the soul of a spacecraft. The secret sauce, what made it special. This wasn't just about aircraft innovation. The Soviets were combining 3 wild concepts. Reusable spacecraft before it was cool. The MiG-105 was designed to survive space and return multiple times. Long before NASA's space shuttle ever flew, the Russians were already testing thermal tiles and heat-resistant alloys for reusable spaceplanes. Interceptor in space. This wasn't a peaceful glider. It was supposed to be armed. The Spiral could theoretically carry space weaponry, think kinetic projectiles or even miniature nukes, to disable enemy satellites or strike strategic targets from orbit. A rapid launch concept. Unlike traditional rockets that took hours to fuel, the Spiral was envisioned to launch quickly, from a prepared surface or even from the back of a bomber aircraft. It promised fast deployment without complex ground infrastructure. In short, they wanted to build the world's first reusable military spacecraft, and they almost did. The prototype. Mixing dream and reality. Between 1966 and 1978, the Soviet Union built a full-scale suborbital test prototype of the MiG-105. It wasn't meant to reach space, not yet. But they needed to test its aerodynamic behavior, its landing gear, its glide characteristics. This version was called the MiG-105-11, nicknamed Lapot, Lapti, the Russian word for bast shoe because of its flat shape. The first test flight took place in 1976. It launched like an airplane, was towed to altitude and released. The pilot, Fyodor Fast Hands Anoshin, took control and guided the craft into a landing. It worked. Barely. The craft managed not to snap in half or cartwheel into the tundra. For a moment, just a moment, it looked like the future had arrived. Why it failed? Death by bureaucracy. So why don't we see the MiG-105 today, sitting in a museum next to the space shuttle? Because it never got past testing. The program was quietly canceled in 1978.